If you think a 45-degree incline bench press is building the upper pec, it might actually just be building the delts instead. I am John Jewett with J3U University. We elevate the physique education standard. And today, I want to dive in with you about using the 45-degree incline bench press. As I was taught coming up in bodybuilding that this was a great movement to start with to develop the upper pec, where we have a lot of lag in development. And I've been lacking pec development a lot of my career, and maybe because of the few reasons we're going to cover today about pressing angles to get the most out of your pec development. So we're going to look at pec anatomy, what the science says, also what should we be doing, and how should we be programming our chest training to get the most out of chest development. So anatomy first for the pec is going to help us understand the pressing angles we should be working at. Now, this band is going to illustrate my actual pec fibers, which the pec has its insertion point on our humerus, and we'll see that it does have some of our clavicular fibers that move in this upward pressing angle. We'll also have our sternal fibers that move directly across the chest and contribute a lot to this horizontal adduction. We also have our costal fibers that move in a slight decline of an angle. Now, this pec is fan shaped, right? And has one insertion point. So at any of these angles, all the pec fibers are going to have contribution. When you see this degree of what angle you press at, you might have a slight bit of bias to that part of the pec, and this creates what angle should we be pressing at. So if we know this type of orientation of where these pec fibers originate at, what they insert at, it gives us some working mechanics of where we should be setting our incline benches to put different biases into that part of the pec. Another point around pec fiber orientation is to not just think of the pec in this 2D plane, it works in a whole three-dimensional line. So we do see from our side view as well that as I get more into scapular retraction, what happens to these pec fibers? They lengthen, right? So we're getting more range of motion as we create retraction of the scapula. The pec wraps around the rib cage. Well, to actually shorten the pec, it's going to have a degree of bringing the scapula and wrapping it back around this rib cage, right? Contributing to protraction. So we should have these scapulas moving if our goal is to fully lengthen and shorten the pec, which is going to also determine our cueing and our function of what we want in the bench press. So what does the science say? We can look at this 2020 EMG paper. We have 30 randomized subjects testing the bench press at varying bench press angles from 0, 15, 30, 45, and all the way up to 60 degrees. They put this EMGs all over the upper, the mid, and the lower pecs to see what has activity as they're doing these lifts. And what we see is when we start at 0 degrees, we have about an equal contribution of all pec fibers. As we move to 15 degrees, we have a lesser contribution to the mid and lower pec fibers, and the upper pec fibers increase a little bit. Moving up to 30 degrees, we see the lower and mid pec fibers drop off more drastically, reaching a peak activation of the upper pec fibers. Now, going beyond 30 degrees, we see a big drop off in all pec fiber contribution, and the front delt really starts to dominate. And as you get to 60 degree, it's even more so contribution to front delt. Now, what about the triceps? Well, at any pressing angle, we have about an equal contribution. So based on this EMG study for muscle activation, training between the 0 to 30 degree mark is optimal for getting the most activation for the pec without going to having more front delt contribution as you get to more steeper angles, which is what we used to think with moving to a 45 degree press being more optimal for the upper pec, when really it's more of a front delt press. So what to do? And that's find your pressing angle. I want you to stand upright, go into horizontal abduction, getting a strong pec contraction, starting down at this really low angle. And if you feel that lower pec contraction and look at your torso angle, this begins to build out the framework of what should your pressing angle be. So I start here and I can feel a lot of strong pec contraction. As I move up, I continue to feel my pec and feel there. And beyond this angle, I start to feel my delt really take over. So here we have this 0 to probably 30 degrees where I have a good working pec contraction. Now keep in mind, as your angle of your torso changes, so does your arm angle with the body. So you might have a flat press, if you have a big arch, turns into a decline press. Now that might bring more pec in or might not, but consider it when you have your torso set up in relation to that arm angle path. So prioritize your mid-range work. So that's going to be in this 0 to 30 degree area, which a lot of it being kind of prioritized in that 0 to 15 degree area, as that'll have the most contribution to the overall pec, which is what we want. Still still get upper, still get mid, still get lower. Nail your setup. So with grip position, we don't want the grip going too wide, as this could limit your range of motion, or the grip going too narrow as we start making this more tricep biased. What we do want in this bottom position is, if you looked from the wrist to the elbow, we should see it directly stacked right over one each other. Now, as far as angle position, we want it at 45 degrees, not out 90 degrees. For one, we'll be able to get a larger range of motion, which can get us greater pec activation. This is exactly what was done in the study as well. Other tip is, should I use a thumbless grip or an actual thumb wrapped around the bar? And I would suggest wrapping the thumb around the bar and squeezing hard. Squeezing the hard activates all the other musculature that helps stabilize joints. Stabilized joints allow you greater force output. It's called the irradiation effect. And you'll notice more stability in your press. If you have more stability, you'll be able to output more from the pec. Last thing in the what to do is head position. Should the head come off the bench or not? And for the most part, this doesn't change much, as most of the pressing has happened below the shoulder joint. But when the head starts to move down, the sternum can drop, and that can change our pressing angle. So you might have some people that shift that loading more into the front delt because it becomes a steeper pressing angle. So what I would suggest is lock in your head position to where you don't change your pressing angle and lose that pec connection that you had. Head down is typically a more stable position, so try and see what works best for you. Programming for a massive chest. If you want more upper pec biased, start with the highest angle that you can get that upper pec contraction with. For many, it's 30 degrees. Then finish with one pressing movement in that horizontal pressing plane from 0 to 15 degrees. And you can do one isolation movement as well, which is usually going to be a fly, and load it at the end of the session in that lengthened position. That 45-degree angle I would leave out of your chest pressing day, as that would be more prioritized if you're looking to develop the front delt.